Bitcoin was a money system, but Ethereum was a platform for building applications. In addition to massive reduction in issuance, we're actually going to start burning Ether, and effectively Ethereum will either steady state with respect to the amount of Ether that are out in the world, or potentially start dropping in terms of the size of its monetary base.
Who is your favorite entrepreneur in the DeFi space right now? Can you name 3?
My favorite entrepreneur in the DeFi space is all of them, because it is because it's a beautifully interoperative ecosystem where people are just openly collaborating. It's a really exciting and innovative space.
If you have to name someone who's a serious challenger to Ethereum, who would it be?
I don't consider any projects to be serious challengers to Ethereum.
Almost 8 a.m. in the morning here in Shenzhen, and it's a pleasure that we welcome Mr. Joe Lubin from New York to come and share with us a little bit about the state of Ethereum and consensus. Welcome, sir. How are you today?
Great. Thanks for having me here today.
Fantastic. I mean, you're no stranger to people in the crypto community, but for those who are not from the industry, could you mind giving us a quick introduction about yourself?
Sure. So going way back, did decades of software engineering in fields like robotics, machine vision, AI, or neural networks. I spent a little time at Goldman Sachs before transitioning from being pretty pure technologist to spending some time in the world of finance. So I'm much more of a technologist than a finance person, but essentially ran a fund with a partner, built some trading systems, and that and a handful of technical activities involving public key cryptography led me to become very aware of Bitcoin early on. And so I jumped into that ecosystem in a very active way, but I didn't go to meetups or events, but I did read absolutely everything that was going on. So I came to understand that space really well. And when I had an opportunity to meet Vitalik Buterin, we're both from Toronto, so in December 2013, I had an occasion to meet with Vitalik. So spoke with him for a little while about this paper that he'd written about a month ago, describing a platform called Ethereum. And that sounded very interesting to me. It sounded very interesting to everybody who heard about it at the time. And many of us sort of coalesced in meetups and Skype sessions. And basically a few weeks later, a bunch of us gathered in a house in Miami, the North American Bitcoin conference, where Vitalik was actually delivering the paper. And we pretty much formed the Ethereum project a little bit more formally around Vitalik. And so I haven't really slept since then. It's been a tremendous ride. So a year after that formation took shape, we were getting close to launching version 1, the Ethereum platform. And I started a company called Consensus, which has ended up building out quite a bit of the infrastructure for the Ethereum ecosystem. So we essentially a product and infrastructure company right now, but we've built some major consortium projects with enterprises. We've worked with hundreds of enterprise customers from around the world in different industries, and have a big role in not just delivering Ethereum 1 infrastructure and solutions, but also in building out and soon launching Ethereum 2.
I mean, I would love to know more about your experience. I mean, I read your bio. You went to Princeton and you worked for Goldman, and that's quite a pedigree. And you know, in my past experience going to various Ethereum conferences, that's not quite the same background as your typical Ethereum developer.
I think the ecosystem has a pretty diverse corpus of talent. Certainly there are a lot of pure technologists, there are a lot of pure entrepreneurs. In our company, we have people who are heavily on the finance side, we have marketers, we have people who do custom development for customers, and people who build products based on their vision. So when you've grown into a pretty broad ecosystem, it requires all types, and many of those types are incredibly talented, are really world class.
I'm not disputing the fact that Ethereum developers are the most talented in the world at all. I might be generalizing a bit, but a lot of them are degens, or what's the new word is.
So your assumption is that it's a bunch of crypto anarchist
I've been to
people?
Conferences. I'm not completely new to the industry. Sure. Okay. You can argue that consensus is a different lot, which I agree.
And a lot of our ecosystem sort of started out with ethos a little bit similar to that of Bitcoin, where it was indeed counterculture. But the distinguishing element of Ethereum is while it retained this notion of building better systems for the planet, or building technology that enables people on the planet to build better systems for themselves, a railing against central banks so much, it was this notion that decentralized governance and decentralized systems have the potential to work better and be more robust and serve more people, small companies, individuals better. And really, Bitcoin was a money system, but Ethereum was a platform for building applications. And so very different mindset. And so it attracted many world-class technologists, world-class thinkers, because that's where technologists go, to the coolest opportunities, the coolest vistas. And I think Ethereum was one project that offered that.
I think you covered this already, but if you had to describe the vision for Ethereum in a short sentence or a few sentences, what would that be?
It's valuable to contrast it with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is a system that is sort of a money system of the people, by the people, of the people, for the people, is a narrow set of financial use cases around this token called Bitcoin. It's a protocol that enables people to transfer that token amongst each other, and to be certain that the system is fair within reason, because it is being processed by a very wide variety of actors who are all coming into consensus every period of time about exactly what happened and when it happened on the system. And it's enormously expensive to try to undo or to improperly manipulate the history of that system. So a new way of building fair financial infrastructure. What Bitcoin lacked is what Ethereum excels at. It's the ability to run programs on a very similar blockchain system, a more capable blockchain system in many ways, and to be certain that those programs will complete, provided you pay enough ether and gas in order to enable the programs to complete, to be certain that everybody on the system agrees on exactly what happened and when. And so you can get trusted transactions with people you don't know, with others you compete with, and guaranteed execution of agreements in the same sorts of contexts. And so the vision for Ethereum is to build a base trust foundation, or to be an important aspect of a new base trust foundation for the planet. It's not big enough and decentralized yet to really accomplish that purpose, but it's doing a good job at accomplishing that purpose in its current context. There are still extremely well-resourced actors on the planet who can potentially attack Ethereum and remove its ability to be a base trust layer, but it is moving in the right direction. And if it grows sufficiently, it can be that for the planet. This base trust foundation is now enabling something called decentralized finance, which is a set of financial protocols that are being built by people, that are being forked by other people, that are being used by people. And there's a lot of tremendous experimentation and innovation going on in what is essentially the development of a new financial plumbing layer for the planet. So you can think of it as a global digital asset settlement layer for the planet. And if you've got a trust foundation and a financial plumbing layer with lots of different kinds of protocols for exchange, lending, borrowing, insurance, etc., then you have that financial infrastructure that can be a magnet to bring lots of businesses onto a platform like that. So perhaps ambitious vision is that it's a technology that can undergird how the world re-architects its systems to make them fairer and to enable more entities to have greater agency on those platforms, not just massive organizations who suck up most of the agency.
Just so I understand, it's to re-engineer the financial system or every system?
So the idea is to build increased fairness, increased trust into our systems, or to create this foundation on which more trustworthy systems can be built. What niches, what industries don't want more trustworthy systems? So it starts with this foundational trust layer, and then you build the financial plumbing that enables virtually any system on the planet to either architect itself anew or re-architect itself.
I mean, one of my biggest regrets of my crypto career is not getting into Ethereum early enough, but of course that's not a mistake that you've made. You know, can you take us back to the beginning at the crowd sale? I mean, what happened there? Vitalik came to China in 2014, and I think a lot of people participated. I met him at the time, but I didn't really get it at the time. And you know, can you bring us back to that kind of pivotal moment of Ethereum raising a record amount for a project like that at that time? Can you tell us a little bit about who participated? Like, you know, what were some of the, you know, things that happened then?
So the crowd sale happened in sort of the summer, towards the end of the summer of 2014. It took us many months. So first we gathered in January 2014 to sort of formed the shape of the project in our heads, and there was still a lot of work to do to really structure it. And we went into that week of discussions thinking that we'd hold the crowd sale the next Tuesday, basically. And then some of us started to realize, hey, this Ether token that we're talking about, we think of it as a utility token. We think of it as a fuel that powers transactions, that powers storage on this new blockchain network called Ethereum. But maybe we should have a chat with some lawyers and get their opinion on how we can ensure that we sell this token to many potential users of the token without being seen by certain securities regulators around the world to be selling unregistered securities to investor types. And so we did many months of work before we were comfortable launching the token sale. We deep diligence in how we can frame the token as a utility token, and we were quite certain by this analysis that we weren't selling a security. And although the SEC in the US sort of took the easy way out and they declared Ethereum sufficiently decentralized, and they didn't want to say anything about a token sale, whether that was a sale of a security or not. Effectively, Ethereum is in a great position because its token is considered a commodity in the US and by regulators around the world. August, the sale lasted for 42 days. I believe there were a little bit north of 9,000 separate buyers of the token. And we were very rigorous in our documentation about how you should think of this token. Basically, it was being sold to be used by software developers building on the platform or potential users intending to use it on the platform. And it was a wildly successful sale that enabled us to hire even more talented people and build out the system in remarkably good time. So it was launched in July of 2015. It came out remarkably quickly for an incredibly sophisticated system that many people in the industry said would be impossible to build.
I mean, Ethereum certainly seems unstoppable at the moment, with about 50 incredible new projects coming out every day from the ecosystem. I mean, if I think of Ethereum as vaguely a company, then I can't think of any comparable company on earth that has so much energy and such diverse talent.
I would compare it to the internet or the World Wide Web, just a very early version of it.
I'm glad you mentioned the World Wide Web. I mean, a lot of people describe where we are now as the Netscape moment. I mean, would you agree with that statement, or are we at the Facebook moment?
We're not at the Facebook moment yet. And I think we're past the Netscape moment, moving rapidly past it at least. I think we really turned the corner with DeFi. There were many complaints for quite a long time that the hype is so big, but where's the killer app? People aren't really using the system, or consumers aren't really using the system. So with DeFi, we have essentially attracted technical people that aren't pure technologists. They aren't pure software developer type technologists. They are financial nerds. They're users of the protocol that bringing things together in novel ways. And so, and I think the interfaces to the system are much more varied than just the browser. So browser in the early days gave you access to the internet of information. And with wallets like our own MetaMask, with some other wallets out there, there is that sort of access to the system, whether it's serving as a wallet or in the case of MetaMask, MetaMask is both a browser extension as well as a mobile wallet. And it is an outstanding application browser, just similar to a web browser. There are many other ways of utilizing the technology though. One can use it through something like Baseline protocol that enables organizations to link up their agreements or link up their business processes. One can use the technology in private permission contexts. One can build gaming infrastructure or games or other kinds of applications that essentially use the infrastructure, the smart contracts, the tokenization of the platform in novel ways. It is essentially a new kind of computation platform that brings the internet of value, the internet of agreements to lots of different applications. So it is certainly a richer offering right now than what Netscape was sitting on top of with respect to HTTP and HTML, the web protocols.
What do you see as the next big opportunity, or what do you want to encourage entrepreneurs to kind of try their hands at?
We're at the start of the next big opportunity. The next big opportunity is building the decentralized financial plumbing layer for the planet. And we are seeing what people are calling magic internet money Lego financial protocols. And that basically means that there are these small groups of really smart people who are building out financial protocols for decentralized exchange of tokens or lending, borrowing in a bunch of different varieties, or prediction markets, or issuing equities, issuing bonds, creating derivatives, creating synthetics representing real world assets. Insurance is going to be just a spectacularly large use case in that space, just getting started. We have so much to go in terms of building those things. And it's not just building the protocols themselves, it's snapping them together like Legos so that people can get the benefit of the constellation of different services in a quest for yield or in a quest to protect their capital a little bit better. This is going to go on for quite a while. I imagine that we're going to bring some AI to the situation. I think we're going to have bots that are scanning the financial opportunities in the space, realizing, tranching up different capital flows with respect to different risks. Maybe can imagine a bot actually securitizing a bunch of capital flows that it identifies and automatically selling those off within a few seconds. Things are going to get very interesting. So the next major opportunity, I think, is just starting to happen. I mentioned before something called Baseline Protocol. Baseline Protocol is a project that Consensus, Ernst & Young did a lot of the early heavy lifting on. Microsoft was also supportive and a bunch of other companies are now in the mix. And actually hundreds, a small number of hundreds of companies are now in the mix. And Baseline Protocol makes use of public mainnet Ethereum, but it uses it in an unusual new way. It uses it to effectively serve as a middleware layer, a substrate that enables companies, one company or many companies, to sync up their agreements and to sync up their business processes via something called zero knowledge proofs. And so once things are synced up, can essentially ensure that they remain in sync. This is all done without leaking any sensitive information onto the mainnet. All of the sensitive information stays on each company's side of their firewall, and only the proofs that sort of entangle or link the information are actually shared to make sure that everything proceeds in sync. The really exciting aspect of this, and that's already very exciting, I believe. We've done demos with SAP and Microsoft Dynamics, keeping those systems sync. Really exciting aspect is that we're starting to tokenize things on those projects. So you can tokenize the money paying for certain things. We already have stable coins that enable that. You can tokenize inventory, you can tokenize invoices, you can factor those invoices. And so we're about, I believe, to embark on a world where these enterprises are going to sort of dip their toe into the DeFi water. If there is capital available to finance certain things that need to be financed, it's sitting in the same place as these companies are going to be sitting with their business processes. And so I expect that enterprise is coming to DeFi possibly within a year.
Enterprises have been saying that they want to blockchainize for quite a long time. I remember seeing an announcement in the news, Goldman Sachs saying we're now a technology company, or JP Morgan saying we're now doing a blockchain project called Quorum. And then I saw recently that you acquired Quorum. Can you tell us about what happened there? What's Quorum first and foremost, and why did you acquire it?
JP Morgan is a great bank, and they have a great blockchain practice. They have been involved heavily in Ethereum since very early on. And what they wanted to build a bunch of applications on blockchain, but they needed an enterprise-friendly version of Ethereum in order to do that. And it was so early that they pretty much had to build it themselves. So they built it, and we built something similar a bit later than they did, and we both did it in the context of something called the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, which is hundreds of companies that focused on essentially enterprise-friendly Ethereum, and its mission will evolve beyond that soon. Essentially, we built and they built these projects according to that specification. JP Morgan was wildly successful in doing that. So they have built applications like the Interbank Information Network and JPM Coin, which have hundreds of financial institutions around the world, especially on IIN. And I think there are a little bit over 400 financial institutions at this point on IIN. IIN sits on Enterprise Ethereum protocol called Quorum. So Quorum has two layers. It has an Ethereum layer, pretty normal Ethereum layer, and then it has a confidentiality layer on top of that, so that different actors on the system can have confidential transactions that effectively nobody else can see. And so JP Morgan was probably more successful at dissemination of the Quorum platform than maybe they intended, and there are probably about 1,000 organizations around the world beyond IIN that are using it. JP Morgan is not set up to be a software company, and they didn't really want to be a software company.
And they were giving this away for free, right?
Sure, yeah. And so the issue there is that there are many organizations that wanted to use Quorum, but the support wasn't really available, or other organizations that wanted to use it and couldn't use it because the support wasn't available. And so Consensus has been building on Quorum for a few years. We've got a customer success and support group that's been running for nearly 3 years now that has been supporting Quorum networks. And essentially, JP Morgan felt that Consensus would be the best stewards of the project. We continue to build out the roadmap for Quorum together, and Consensus can offer a comprehensive or complete enterprise blockchain solution, where JP Morgan wasn't really interested in providing certain pieces. So support is one of those major pieces. We have a suite of software, sort of middleware for orchestrating transactions, document management, digital asset issuance, digital asset full lifecycle, data analytics, etc. So they all sit on top Quorum. And soon some sophisticated cloud infrastructure offerings will be available as well.
I think we touched on some really interesting points here. I mean, everybody understands JP Morgan's decision-making mechanism. They have a board and they have shareholders, and employees work to try and maximize shareholders' interests with the direction of the board, etc. But what baffles most people in the traditional industry about the crypto sector is that the governing mechanism and the incentive structure is not very clear to them. With an upgrade of Ethereum 2.0 coming up, do you mind giving us an explainer on how Ethereum governs itself? Like, how did we come to the decision that there's going to be a 2.0 upgrade? I mean, what if I don't agree with it? What if I'm an Ethereum miner and I quite enjoy the extortionate gas fees?
So Ethereum governs itself similar to how the internet governs itself. The internet has been essentially built out and governed by volunteers for decades. The IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, has a pretty well structured system for how people write up ideas as requests for comments and discuss those ideas in writing or in other kinds of forums and propose implementation solutions, and the merits of those solutions tend to win. Sometimes it gets political, where you have different organizations, either in that context or in the W3C context, World Wide Web Consortium context, who are just trying to push their own agenda for commercial reasons. But in a pretty big sense, the development of the internet was decentralized, and the development of the web has been significantly decentralized. There are many models of governance in corporations, so it's not one size fits all or one pattern fits all. Sure. And there are many models of governance in protocols. So whether it's a layer one decentralized protocol like Ethereum or Bitcoin, or a DeFi protocol like Compound, it's really about defining who the stakeholders are and how those stakeholders are officially recognized, either through ownership of shares or ownership of tokens, what the rights, powers, and responsibilities of those different stakeholders are, how votes are made. And so it's very similar to corporations. It provides a lot more flexibility, in my opinion, and a lot more speed and fluidity. And it is global. Yes, there are borders between nation states that affect certain things on blockchain systems, but it's much less apparent than obviously the border, how borders affect governance of corporations. So I would argue that it's very similar, but presents more creative freedom, opportunity, optionality for how we design those systems. If you're talking about how Ethereum itself is specifically governed, it is an open source, or it's a set of many open source projects, and they are all held together by a protocol. The protocol is mostly specified right now by a set of tests that the different developer groups agree on. So again, similar to the Internet Engineering Task Force, we have something called Ethereum Improvement Protocols, where people write up cool ideas or bad ideas, and they get debated and they move towards maturity. Some of them get designated for implementation. Those that are designated for implementation need to be implemented by multiple clients on the network because there are a bunch of different Ethereum clients that understand and implement the Ethereum protocol. And if you can't connect to the Ethereum network and process all the transactions on the Ethereum network, then you don't really implement the full Ethereum protocol. If you can do that, then you're an Ethereum client and you are one of the groups that has effectively made the final decision on what Ethereum is.
So it's kind of a meritocratic system to an extent.
Very much so. Very much so. There are lots of researchers, either at the deep protocol level or at the decentralized or open finance level. It's the early stages of a global economy. And so governance is going to take many different forms at different layers, and different kinds of expertise are necessary at different layers.
I mean, slightly earlier, you mentioned something that I've never really even thought about because Ethereum is so big. You mentioned that there could be some actors that could present a threat to Ethereum. Would that be somebody that holds a lot of Ethereum, or somebody that holds, what kind of actor would that be?
So it's getting to be a really big system, but in the context of global systems, it's still pretty small. Way back years ago, there was an episode called The DAO, where there was a whole bunch of ether in a smart contract, and there was a vulnerability, and an attacker exploited the vulnerability, and that attacker could have, if circumstances were different, could have pulled a tremendous amount of ether. I think it was about 15% of the monetary base or something like that. Could have pulled a lot of ether out of the system. And if that person was malicious, and there was reason to believe that it may have been somebody who would prefer to see Ethereum end rather than make a whole bunch of money, if that person was malicious in that way, that person could have used their ether to do denials of service attacks for a very long time and drive people crazy for a long time. And we would have figured out a way probably to defeat that situation, and we did, actually. That was the reason why we had to come up with a way to defeat that situation, just because there was a long-term existential threat if something serious wasn't done. Although many people didn't want to make that sort of serious move early on until it became obvious that it was necessary. So one could imagine now that I guess a government could pass laws to make it illegal to hold cryptocurrency or to transact on these networks. That wouldn't kill these networks because there are many nations that probably wouldn't do that. And there are many people who would still use the systems in defiance of government. If a very well-resourced actor, a major nation state, decided to take some time and accumulate lots of ether or buy up a bunch of infrastructure, it could be done such that the gyrations of the price of ether or ways of messing with the infrastructure via denial of service attacks could get very painful. It is possible that Ethereum is sufficiently anti-fragile that it could withstand any sort of attack, because there are a lot of really smart people who are really passionate about keeping Ethereum working and developing. But it really depends on the intent, determination, and resources of your attacker. Anything is attackable by a sufficiently well-resourced attacker.
I mean, this might be a silly question, but once Ethereum becomes a POS, does that mean it's no longer possible to fork?
Not at all. So it's probably useful to define a little bit about forking. So forking means that at a certain point of time, the protocol works in a certain way, and developers decide that the protocol should change in some way. And so you need to write software that implements those changes. Forks are often how the system upgrades itself. Sometimes if there's a group of people who feel like the policies implemented by the protocol are not to their liking, they could choose to implement their own software and if these are great ideas, maybe the whole system follows that software. Or if there's an older group that the main group that decides that they like it the way it is, one could imagine the new system with the new software forking off in one direction and behaving a certain way, maybe to keep proof of work, for instance, and the other group follows the path that they're on, and you have two separate systems that are running in parallel, each sharing the same history from that moment of the forking. So some of these forks are intentional and normal operation, and some of them can get contentious. Either way, I think forking is a great mechanism because it does provide people with the opportunity to try something new, whether you're forking just the software itself. It's open source software, you can modify it and start your own system, or you can actually fork an operating protocol if there's a group within the community that feels it would serve them better. So I think that sort of optionality is very interesting. One of the beauties of forking, or the threat of forking, is that I believe it keeps the core developers more honest and more likely to pay attention to more people around them who have different ideas, because there is always the threat. I mean, we want our protocol to be used by as many people as possible, and if a bunch of people are forking it and creating their own communities, then our community gets smaller. And so it would be better to listen to more people, incorporate their ideas, make sure that they feel heard as community members, so that they don't feel the need to fork, and their needs are hopefully accommodated within the main system.
I mean, a lot of the DeFi projects that you mentioned this year, they're very innovative, and they're bringing in this new financial game in town, which is no pre-mine and no team tokens, and a lot of these rules that is supposed to be about fair distribution. And that has made me as an investor reflect on what my value is going to be going forward, because there's essentially no need for asset managers anymore. So my two questions is, A, how are these core developers paid? And B, apart from VCs, which I think is being eliminated as a role, like what other kind of roles do you think will be, a thing of the past, and what kind of roles or skill sets do you think will be useful or still be useful in an Ethereum future?
Yeah, so the fair launch or fair distribution phenomenon is an excellent one, and I think it'll be appropriate in various contexts. I don't think it'll dominate every context. I think there are lots of reasons why fairly traditional VC can continue its role, or innovative venture capitalism can figure out new ways to operate on these new platforms. In terms of how people get paid, I don't have a great answer to that.
But Ethereum core developers, you must know them. I mean, who signs their paycheck, or do they get a paycheck?
Nearly all of them get a paycheck, either from the Ethereum Foundation or for the companies that they work for.
Okay.
So there are lots of people who do work in the W3C or IETF. They're generally working for companies, and it's their career. They're deeply embedded in this stuff. In our ecosystem, there may be people who are doing it because they have their own assets and they're technologically capable, and they want to build something better that they can make use of. There are so many different reasons why people would want to get involved. So I'm not worried at all about how these people get paid. Very few, if any, of these people are having trouble surviving.
I'm not worried about that. I just want to understand how they're incentivized.
If they want higher paid jobs, they can easily get them. So how they're incentivized, I guess we'll see for how long this the fair launch phenomenon stays really pure. I think it's valuable and important, and we'll see significant aspects of it. But also, if you're standing up a protocol like this and you're providing liquidity, for instance, to a protocol, you're getting paid for that liquidity. So the people who are building these protocols are also participating in the use of these protocols, and a bunch of these protocols are designed to reward the people who are using the protocol. And so the builders are getting paid in that way. Hopefully, there are just so many ways to organize a project with respect to getting it financed and attracting talent.
And my second question is, what kind of skill set do you think will still be valuable or remain valuable in Ethereum future?
I would say that being a software developer, being a mathematician, being a physicist, being an economist, understanding mechanism design, all these things are incredibly relevant. And the kinds of roles that we see in today's economy, the newer ones, were unfathomable 15 and 20 years ago. I couldn't really explain to myself from 20 years ago what a Twitter influencer or an Instagram influencer is and does and why that's relevant in big business at this point. So essentially we're building these new network collaboration platforms, either in public permissionless contexts or more private contexts, but those are going to merge in time. We're building them on a new trust foundation. So ideally there'll be better systems. We're building them natively digital technology, tokenization. So we're enabling trustworthy exchange of different tokens of value that represent either natively digital things or real world assets. And all of those are being built into this network collaboration system that has its own governance. And so the ways that people are going to live their lives and live their leisure pursuits are on these collaboration networks where they log in from their own identity that they control their personal information, and they're making decisions, they're investing in things, they're building things, they're participating in these systems. And I will be probably connected to many of those networks going forward. I'm sure you will also. And so the kinds of skills that are required to either build these things or, even more importantly, to interact on these things are to be developed. They won't be that different from the skills that we've developed for interacting with the World Wide Web, but it will be an increasingly decentralized World Wide Web where people have control of their personal information and economic and political agency on these systems.
If you were to advise somebody who just finished a arts or humanities degree on their career choices, would it just be sit tight and enjoy?
If you're inclined to be technical, if you're inclined to figure out how systems work, or if you're creative and want to build systems, then being a software developer, I'm a little bit biased because I used to be one, at least.
Okay.
It's a very powerful capability to have. That said, there are technologies like GPT-3, essentially an AI technology, a deep learning technology that has shown the ability to take descriptions in English and turn those into software programs. Creative people are going to have the ability to build their own software without writing the source code of the software within a handful of years. And so it's always good to know at a very deep level how everything works. If you're inclined to do that, then I would do that. But just being creative and passionate about something is probably all you need, and you'll pick up whatever you need to pick up to make it work.
I mean, one topic I would love to pick your brains on, it's something that's caught a lot of media attention over here. It's central banks issuing digital currencies. And I saw recently that Consensus won a contract, or it's a collaboration with Hong Kong MA to advise the Hong Kong government on that. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Not much more, no. It's a project that is essentially cross-border payments. So there are a bunch of CBDC projects out in the world, or many of them actually. Consensus has participated or is participating or is about to participate in a half dozen central bank projects. Many of them are wholesale, meaning they operate between central banks or between financial institutions. Some of them are retail, meaning they are effectively providing a central bank issued currency through a central bank system to consumers to enable them to make payments or move money around peer-to-peer. Bahamas is about to go live, I think, sometime in October, a retail system enabling people to make purchases. These systems are, first of all, I think very exciting for our ecosystem because some of them will be implemented on blockchain, but they don't have to be implemented on blockchain to be relevant to our ecosystem. The fact that they're essentially natively digital currencies can enable other platforms to recognize them potentially and make use of them. And so we need lots of monetary systems in the world. They have different characteristics. Choice in our different monetary systems is really valuable. Certainly central banks have a monopoly in their domains and their jurisdictions, but increasingly they're competing with one another, and increasingly, and it's gotten well understood now by central bankers, they're competing with these permissionless cryptocurrency protocols. And so I think money has taken many different forms over the millennia. Natively digital is a much more efficient form, and blockchain-based is a great form, depending on your philosophy. If you only want to have a very centrally controlled digital currency, you probably don't need blockchain, but you may still benefit from it because it can be more robust if a bunch of different financial institutions that consider members are running that infrastructure. But if you're a country that is philosophically inclined to enable your citizenry to have more financial privacy, or to even have presence on the network, to upload programs to the network, to use programs on the network, then a blockchain system would be really excellent for that. And there are some nation states that are considering that sort of infrastructure, although I don't anticipate anybody doing anything that's not very well controlled early on. Probably the right way to do it is to stand up an infrastructure that is pretty centralized, but has the potential to open up and become more decentralized.
I mean, so Consensus' role with vis-a-vis these government is one of a technology advisor?
Technology builder, usually.
Okay, so you build alongside with the government to their specification.
Yeah, pretty much. It depends on the project, but we've built large consortia. We've built Congo Commodity Trade Finance Consortium and Covantis post-trade processing consortium for some of the major commodities companies in the world. So it's generally working with client who represents the domain expert, and we represent the expert in technical implementation. So we would spec out the project in close association with the customer, and it's usually us that builds out either all of it or the bulk of it.
I guess Consensus in this capacity is kind of like a red hat of the Ethereum system.
One of the things we do, yeah. We do many things in the Ethereum ecosystem.
Everyone knows that Bitcoin has a fixed supply of 21 million, and each of the new forks have a same number of fixed supply.
So yeah, Ethereum doesn't have a fixed supply of Ether. The way we mapped out the issuance curve way back a long time ago was that it would asymptote within 100 years or something like that, very similar to Bitcoin. It's supposed to asymptote in the year 2140 or a bit earlier. And I don't know, I think it seems unlikely that we'll get way beyond 100 million tokens. The issuance rate of Ether has dropped quite dramatically since our initial projections. Effectively, the issuance rate is based on how we calculate security for the network, and it has been determined a few times in the history of Ethereum that there was no need to issue as many Ether as we were issuing, and that's going to evolve even further with Ethereum 2. So for a little while, there will be Ether issued on Ethereum 2 and Ethereum 1 at the same time, although issuance is dropped quite significantly already. When we make the move fully to Ethereum 2, because of the proof of stake mechanism is so much more secure and so much less expensive to run, then the amount of Ether required to be issued to incentivize people to contribute their resources and to keep the system secure will be much, much smaller than it is right now. And so the issuance of Ether will again drop quite precipitously. And there's also a project that Consensus is working on closely with the Ethereum Foundation and some other groups in the ecosystem called EIP 1559, which effectively changes the way that fees are paid on the Ethereum network and will cause, for very good reason, Ether to be burned when Ether is being used to pay for transactions. And so in addition to massive reduction in issuance, we're actually going to start burning Ether and effectively, Ethereum will either steady state with respect to the amount of Ether that are out in the world, or potentially start dropping in terms of the size of its monetary base. If it drops too precipitously, then maybe the group of core developers that define the protocol would vote to increase issuance, or maybe we build a decentralized system with decentralized governance that enables many different actors in different roles to participate in effectively setting the monetary policy on the platform. One thing you could do is measure how much economic activity is happening on the platform, and if the economic activity grows dramatically in a sustained way, then maybe it does make sense for the protocol to recognize that and start issuing more Ether.
So if I understand correctly, like with all the recent activities happening in DeFi, etc., and pretty much, I think Consensus issued a study saying a majority of ETH is locked in some project or another. So during a time like this, there would be
not a majority, no.
Well, a large proportion of them. Does that mean that's a time when you issue more tokens?
There's a ton of Ether being locked or staked in these financial protocols to essentially serve as collateral. And that's going to be true as Ethereum 2 launches, because lots of Ether will be staked in the proof of stake mechanism in order for Ethereum 2 to operate. So in terms of the total available Ether, readily available liquid Ether, it is being very significantly affected by a whole bunch of applications. So it's quite different from Bitcoin, where there aren't a lot of ways to lock up Bitcoin for some sort of gain or some sort of use. On Ethereum, that's just very different, where who knows, we may end up seeing 75% of Ether or so locked up in different protocols for different reasons.
Okay, so does that mean, in theory, if everything's locked up, then, with even a small amount of capital coming into the ecosystem, supply and demand should mean the price goes up, right? Unless core developers vote to increase supply.
Yeah. Absolutely the case. If say 75% of Ether is locked up, you could imagine that prices of things on the Ethereum platform would go up.
Do you see any challengers to Ethereum? I mean, all of these newer, faster blockchains, any of them, that you're paying attention to?
I pay attention to a bunch of them. There's some good projects out there, some very talented teams. They're about 4 or 5 years behind in terms of infrastructure development. They don't move as fast, even though Ethereum is a very big project and a very big ecosystem with tons of infrastructure. It still moves really remarkably fast in terms of protocol development. It still attracts the best and the brightest. It still has many more teams working on a thing where only one team is working on that thing in other protocols. And essentially the liquidity on the system in terms of the amount of money, the number of developers, the fact that almost all of decentralized finance projects are being built on Ethereum, and the monetary liquidity attracts more monetary liquidity, and the talent attracts more talent. And if you're going to build a DeFi protocol, you want to be able to connect to other DeFi protocols. And so Ethereum is really the only place to do that. And even other networks are understanding that. I think there's over $1 billion of Bitcoin in wrapped form, wrapped BTC, sitting on Ethereum, just because that's where DeFi is. People holding Bitcoin want to avail themselves of the yields on Ethereum. Several smaller projects are creating bridges to Ethereum, so they can, I guess, be part of that system. And bottom line is that it's no matter how good you are, how good your ideas are, they're going to have to be spectacularly good, because unlike Ethereum and Bitcoin, you're coming of age in an era in which securities regulators are watching. And in order to get real traction for your protocol, you need a token, and you need to effectively develop a vibrant community of developers and users, usually based on selling them on the idea that this token is going to appreciate in value by the agency of some core group. So by definition, that's a security. Therefore, you're not going to be able to issue it broadly and equitably. And so you end up with projects that are effectively VC coins or professor coins that are technically pretty interesting, but will have difficulty getting broad adoption. Some of them may end up carving out interesting niches potentially. And ultimately, I think a bunch of them will survive and carve out niches and connect to one another and connect to Ethereum and essentially be part of a trust layer of interoperating decentralized protocols are specialized for different purposes.
Any comments about Polkadot or Near?
Both are good projects.
If you have to name someone who's a serious challenger to Ethereum, who would it be?
I don't consider any projects to be serious challengers to Ethereum. What do you mean by serious challenger? Like replace Ethereum or be 1/100th as big as Ethereum?
Or at least be of a similar clout as Ethereum in terms of impact?
Well, there's nobody anywhere close at this point. Despite what you read in the press, they make their living off of clickbait. But if you really understand what's going on the different projects, all the other projects are really tiny compared to the Ethereum ecosystem, other than Bitcoin.
Can you tell us a little bit about Infura? What's that and what is that trying to do?
Infura is a consensus project that represents a major infrastructural element for the Ethereum ecosystem. It handles, on a busy day, many billions of queries and transactions from the ecosystem. So it's the Ethereum ecosystem, it's the IPFS or interplanetary file ecosystem, and it essentially enables developers to have easy access to the blockchain for running transactions or just for reading data from the blockchain. When you read data from the blockchain, you don't need to run a transaction. It doesn't cost you anything to read data from the blockchain. So it's not easy to read data from the blockchain unless you know what you're doing. And so Infura makes data readily available to developers, so they don't have to worry about the complexities of getting that. And essentially, a huge number of applications do a lot more reading from the blockchain than writing to the blockchain. Every time you check out your portfolio, you're basically reading from the blockchain. So a lot of people do that a lot of times a day, and Infura makes that easy. It's doing some sophisticated things. It's going to enable much more powerful and much more efficient ways of querying the blockchain. We're looking at some interesting ways to make blockchain very usable for enterprises who don't want to deal with the complexities of holding Ether or figuring out gas fees.
So is that competing sort of in the same area as Filecoin?
Now, Filecoin is a blockchain protocol that enables the development of markets for decentralized storage. Filecoin and IPFS have both been built by a group called Protocol Labs, a company called Protocol Labs. They work intimately with one another. Filecoin is a protocol that Infura could implement, for instance, as it does for IPFS, but it's a protocol that many kinds of miners around the world, both storage miners and retrieval miners, can plug into and essentially use to build out what would be called a distributed storage layer for the decentralized web. So Ethereum and IPFS and Filecoin are very complementary. Ethereum does the financial aspects and the agreement aspects of software systems on a blockchain, and Ethereum programs often make use of the storage that is made available in IPFS and soon in Filecoin when it goes live. And so we've been building Ethereum projects using IPFS for years, and we anticipate using IPFS and Filecoin quite a lot going forward.
How the geopolitical situation in the real world affects like technology implementation, kind of sitting from where we're at right now. And we have a generally like philosophically a very paternalistic government where the government's trying to look after everybody, and like redistribution of wealth is a big theme in its organizing philosophy. And that's the same with most governments around the world. So that's kind of different from the organizational philosophy of a technology. The role of a tech protocol is to kind of forge forward and break things and innovate and find new ground. How do you see that reconciling with a kind of a slightly more disintegrated world than when Ethereum first started?
So I guess it's not the purview or responsibility of a technological protocol to shape society or to have an opinion on how different actors in society make their way in that economy. That said, these decentralized protocols, especially like Ethereum, that enable greater trust in systems and enable us, because there's greater trust, to build trustworthy collaboration networks, whether they're financial protocol networks or the blockchains themselves or some gaming network or any other kind of application. You can imagine a system like Uber being built on a blockchain where there's a token and there's a protocol that helps navigation and linking users to resource providers, the drivers. And so if the token is required to stake in the system, if you're a driver, you want to stake a security bond, the token's used to pay on the system. One could imagine a system that could be as good as Uber, for instance, but owned by the people provide the service, the drivers, and that use the service. And one could imagine a whole bunch of other businesses being stood up on that network, so food delivery or other things. So on these collaboration networks, and that's one particular example, it's basically a network business model that isn't owned by a single corporation, it's owned collectively by the users of the system. In this potentially brave new world, there may be many opportunities for different people in society to plug into these collaboration networks and earn a living or entertain themselves or transport themselves. And so I think that there's going to be actually much more opportunity to participate actively in your society, economically and politically, rather than perhaps rely on governments to make decisions, which are, let's take the United States, for example, two major political parties, neither of whom are doing a good job representing 99% of the people, in my opinion, because they're not granular enough to understand the many different interests. And so on blockchain-based systems, you could have much more granular groups that are focused on specific things, that can raise money, that can make plans, that can execute those plans. And so I definitely imagine a world where this kind of technology can enable people to govern themselves more effectively and participate more effectively.
Great. Thanks for your time today. I think we're going to ask a few TikTok specific questions, because on TikTok, the speaker will typically try and sell something. So we're going to give you about 30 seconds to a minute to talk about anything that you want to sell to an audience in China.
So if you're interested in the world of cryptocurrencies, digital assets, blockchain, the best way to get involved with that is to download and start using a product called MetaMask. MetaMask is a digital asset wallet on the Ethereum platform. It can hold Ether, the Ethereum token. It can hold many other tokens that are built on the Ethereum network. Some of these tokens are game cards. Other tokens are tokens that you might find in a financial protocol, like a lending protocol. MetaMask comes both in browser extension form, but it also has a beautiful mobile application for iOS or Android, and provides users with the most secure, most enjoyable to use wallet and browser experience in cryptocurrency.
And who is your favorite entrepreneur in the DeFi space right now? Can you name 3?
My favorite entrepreneur in the DeFi space, all of them, because it's a beautifully interoperative ecosystem where people are just openly collaborating. It's a really exciting and innovative space. And it would also be just a terrible idea for me to identify one of those entrepreneurs as the best.
Okay. Or favorite projects. Can you identify projects that you like?
There's some spectacular projects out there. So the obvious ones. So Maker is a great project. Compound's a great project. Could go on for a long time. as I said before, it's all about this DeFi ecosystem that's developing. That it would be cool if one of those projects existed on its own, but it's mind-blowingly cool and globally transformative that a whole ecosystem is developing to become the digital asset and financial protocol layer for the planet.
I mean, most of the DeFi innovation so far has been very US driven. Can you see like Europe or any other like area, India or China, like becoming kind of catching up in terms of the pace of innovation?
Yes, a lot of the early Ethereum development was not really that North America based. A lot of it was in Europe. Some of it was North America, some was in Asia. And so absolutely, mainland China has a lot of advantages with its market. I would expect that many ideas will be taken and iterated and made appropriate for that context. I think it's a global phenomenon. I would argue that it may look to you like many of those projects are American, but our ecosystem is global, and we don't pay that much attention to borders in terms of who we work with. Our company Consensus has many people in many different countries, and I know a lot of the protocols have people from many countries around the world working on them.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you very much. Awesome.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Talk to you
Thanks.
soon. Bye.